The thing about being the only human in a galactic maximum security prison is that you become something of a celebrity and not the good kind. More like that weird exotic pet everyone wants to poke with a stick to see what happens. Unfortunately for my newfound admirers, I wasn't exactly in the mood to be anyone's entertainment. "Look at the squishy pink thing," growled Kravax, a towering mass of crystalline appendages that somehow managed to form words despite lacking anything resembling a mouth. "I heard they break easily." I sighed, not bothering to look up from my Technicolor food cube supposedly adjusted for human consumption, though I had my doubts. You know what else I heard breaks easily? Crystal formations, especially around their resonant frequency. The cafeteria grew quieter. Good. Maybe they'd finally leave me alone to enjoy my mystery meal in peace. But of course that would have been too easy. "Is the tiny mammal threatening me?" Kravax's crystalline body chimed with what passed for laughter among his species. His gang of miscellaneous thugs, a veritable rainbow of the galaxy's most wanted, joined in. Perhaps we should demonstrate proper prison hierarchy to our new pet. I finally looked up, making a show of carefully setting down my spork. "Look, I get it. New guy has to be initiated, pecking order must be established, blah blah blah. But here's the thing, I'm not here because I stole some credits or smuggled illegal spice. I'm here because I took down the entire Orion Syndicate. Solo." More laughter, though slightly less certain this time. Kravax leaned forward, his crystal facets catching the harsh prison lighting. "The Orion Syndicate, that's impossible. They had a fleet of 37 ships? Yeah, had being the operative word. Want to know how I did it?" I smiled, all teeth. "I figured out that their shield harmonics had a critical weakness at 47.3 kilohertz. Funny how certain frequencies can just shatter things." Kravax took half a step back before catching himself. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Hey, what's your species' resonant frequency again?" "Something in the upper ranges, right? Would be a shame if someone had spent their entire first week here studying xenobiology texts in the prison library instead of sleeping." "You're bluffing," Kravax said, but his crystalline structure had taken on a distinctly worried vibration. I started humming. Just a random tune, nothing special, but Kravax flinched like I'd swung at him. "Here's the deal," I said, picking up my spork again. "I'm going to finish my meal. You're going to take your colorful collection of troublemakers and find another table. And we're all going to pretend this little interaction never happened. Because if it does happen again..." I hummed another note, slightly higher this time. A tiny crack appeared in one of Kravax's smaller appendages. The cafeteria erupted in chaos. Inmates scrambled to get away from our table, creating a perfect circle of empty space around me. Kravax's gang scattered like quantum particles achieving superposition, leaving their leader standing alone, vibrating in what I chose to interpret as embarrassment. You, Kravax, struggled to find words. "Are absolutely terrifying," I suggested helpfully. "Yeah, I get that a lot. By the way, you might want to get that crack looked at. I hear the medical bay has some excellent molecular bonding agents." Kravax fled, his crystalline body chiming in distress all the way out of the cafeteria. I returned to my food cube, hiding my smile. The truth was, I hadn't taken down the Orion Syndicate single-handedly. That had been a joint operation involving 3 different planetary defense forces and a small army of AI systems. And I definitely hadn't spent my first week studying xenobiology. I'd been too busy trying to figure out how to make the prison toilet recognize human biological functions. But they didn't need to know that. What I had done, however, was spend 15 years as a sound engineer before my brief career in interstellar law enforcement. And if there's one thing you learn in that line of work, it's how to recognize resonant frequencies. The crack in Kravax's appendage? Pure luck, he must have had a pre-existing structural weakness. But sometimes, luck is all you need to start a reputation. The next few weeks were wonderfully peaceful. Amazing how quickly word spreads in prison when someone takes down the biggest, baddest crystal-based life form in the yard with nothing but a hum tune. The fact that I occasionally walked around whistling various classical pieces probably helped maintain the mystique. Of course, it couldn't last forever. There's always someone who didn't get the memo, or worse, someone who got it and decided to prove themselves anyway. Enter Malblax the Magnificent, his words, not mine, a gelatinous mass of translucent purple goo that fancied himself the next big shot in the prison hierarchy. Now that Kravax had fallen from grace, there was apparently an opening for most likely to terrorize fellow inmates. Human Malblax burbled one day as I was doing laps in the exercise yard, his translator struggling to keep up with his fluctuating vocal sacs. I challenge you to combat. I kept walking, barely sparing him a glance. Pass. You cannot pass. I have issued a formal challenge according to Section 7, Paragraph 3 of the Intergalactic Prison Combat Code. I stopped, turned, and stared at him. You're making that up. I am not. It is a sacred tradition dating back to the first penal colonies of the Andromeda. Still making it up. Malblax rippled in what I assumed was frustration. Fight me, or be forever branded a coward. Okay, first of all, I said, holding up a finger, I'm already branded, literally. They put a tracking chip in my arm when I got here. Second, another finger, I don't care about prison reputation. And third, I smiled that same smile that had sent Kravax running. You really don't want to fight me? But your sound tricks won't work on me, Malblax declared triumphantly. I have no solid form to resonate. I had to give him credit, he'd done his homework. True. But did you know that human sweat contains a variety of salts and minerals that, when properly concentrated, can alter the surface tension of certain gelatinous life forms? Malblax's translator went silent for a moment, presumably processing this information. You're lying. Maybe? Want to find out? I've been running laps for the past hour. I'm practically a walking salt mine right now. The purple mass of goo wavered uncertainly. But the stories say you defeated Kravax with sound. Oh, I did. But that's because it was Tuesday. I like to vary my methods. Keeps things interesting. I took a step toward him, wiping my brow with exaggerated movement. Today's Thursday. Thursday is chemistry day. Malblax retreated so quickly he left a small puddle of himself behind, which quickly evaporated in the artificial sunlight of the exercise yard. The gathered crowd of inmates, who had been hoping for a show, dispersed with a mixture of disappointed mutters and relieved sighs. I resumed my laps, trying not to laugh. The truth was, I had no idea if human sweat could affect gelatinous life forms. But 3 years of failed chemistry in college had taught me one thing: if you say something with enough scientific-sounding confidence, people tend to believe you. The weeks turned into months, and my reputation grew to mythical proportions. According to prison rumors, I had once defeated an entire riot with nothing but a spoon and a bad knock-knock-knock joke. I'd supposedly rewired the prison's artificial gravity using only my shoelaces and knowledge of ancient Earth disco music. Some even claimed I was actually a shape-shifting assassin who had chosen to look human just to mess with everyone. I did nothing to discourage these rumors. In fact, I might have started a few of my own. It's amazing what you can accomplish with a basic understanding of physics, a lot of bluffing, and an encyclopedic knowledge of terrible Earth puns that no alien translator can properly process. But my favorite story, the one that finally cemented my position as the human you absolutely do not mess with, came about entirely by accident. I was in the library, actually studying xenobiology this time. Turns out, it's fascinating stuff when you're not trying to use it to terrify crystal people, when a shadow fell across my table. I looked up to find myself facing what appeared to be a walking collection of shadows with too many eyes. Voidwalker, I nodded politely, recognizing the species. What can I do for you? You, the being whispered in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, are not what you appear to be. I raised an eyebrow. If you're suggesting I'm a shapeshifter, I should warn you that theory's already making the rounds. Though I appreciate the dramatic delivery. No, the Voidwalker moved closer, its eyes blinking in mesmerizing patterns. You are something far more dangerous. You are funny. I blinked. Come again. Our species exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. We see things others cannot. And you possess the most terrifying weapon in the galaxy. A sense of humor. Precisely. The Voidwalker's eyes all narrowed at once. Do you know why humans are the only species in the known galaxy to develop what you call dad jokes? Because we're deeply disturbed as a species. Because you understand the fundamental absurdity of existence itself. You look into the void, see its infinite horror, and decide to make a pun about it. Do you have any idea how terrifying that is to other species? I sat back, genuinely stunned. Are you telling me that the reason everyone's been avoiding me lately isn't because they think I'm dangerous, but because I keep making terrible jokes? What is more dangerous than a being who can laugh in the face of cosmic horror? Who can take the fundamental forces of reality and turn them into wordplay? Why do you think your threat against Kravax worked so well? Because I understood resonant frequencies. Because you made a physics joke while threatening him. Only a being of truly horrifying power would do such a thing. I stared at the Void Walker for a long moment. Then I started laughing. I couldn't help it. The idea that I had accidentally established myself as the most terrifying inmate in a maximum security space prison, because aliens didn't understand human humor was just too perfect. The Void Walker retreated several steps. Please do not do that. The sound of human laughter causes our species physical discomfort. Sorry I managed to get out between chuckles. But you have to admit, it's pretty funny. That is exactly what makes your kind so frightening, the Void Walker whispered, already fading into the shadows. You find humor in everything, even terror itself. Word of my encounter with the Void Walker spread through the prison like a quantum virus, growing more elaborate with each retelling. By the end of the week, inmates were convinced I had made the ancient being flee in terror with nothing but the power of my laughter. Some claimed I had opened a portal to another dimension with a particularly clever play on words. Others swore they had seen reality itself crack when I delivered the punchline to a joke about quantum mechanics. The truth, as usual, was much simpler. But in a prison full of beings who could bend reality, shoot plasma from their appendages, or exist in multiple dimensions, sometimes the most terrifying thing is someone who can look at all that and say, "Hey, that reminds me of a joke." So here I sit, 8 months into my 5-year sentence, enjoying the peculiar peace that comes with being the most feared inmate in a galactic prison. Not because I'm the strongest, or the most violent, or the most technologically advanced, but because I'm the only one who knows that the best weapon isn't a plasma rifle or a quantum manipulator, or even a perfectly pitched musical note. It's the ability to look at a crystalline being and say, with perfect timing, "Hey, what do you call a mineral that doesn't tell dad jokes?" A plain rock. The groans echo through all 12 dimensions of the prison. And that's exactly how I like it. After all, in space, everyone can hear you make bad puns. And sometimes that's scarier than anything else in the Galaxy.OF course. Having a reputation as the galaxy's most terrifying comedian comes with its own unique set of problems. Like the time the prison administrators decided to make me the official cultural integration specialist for new inmates. You want me to what I asked wardens as XTT, whose species appeared to be composed entirely of floating geometric shapes arranged in a vaguely humanoid pattern. Welcome new inmates. The warden's shapes rearranged themselves into what I'd learned was their version of enthusiasm. Your unique ability to terrify and educate simultaneously makes you perfect for the role. I don't terrify people, I protested. I just make terrible jokes until they leave me alone. Precisely, the warden's shapes did a little dance. According to our psychological analysis, exposure to human humor in small doses helps prepare inmates for the harsh realities of prison life. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever. You start tomorrow. First group arrives at 0800 hours. The warden's shapes formed what might have been a wink. Try not to traumatize them too badly. And that's how I found myself standing in front of 20 new inmates, representing species from across 12 different galaxies, trying to figure out how to conduct an orientation session. Welcome to Galactic Correctional Facility Alpha 9, I began, doing my best impression of a tour guide, where the food is questionable, the company is questionable, and the only certainty is that someone's probably questioning you right now. Nervous shuffling from the crowd. I'm your cultural integration specialist, which basically means I'm here to teach you how not to get yourself killed, maimed, or accidentally transformed into a quantum probability cloud. I paused. That last one only happened once, and in our defense, no one knew Schrödinger's cat was a literal being serving time for temporal fraud. A tentacled creature in the back raised an appendage. Is it true what they say? That you defeated the notorious Kravax with nothing but sound waves? I sighed. That story's greatly exaggerated. I just happened to know something about resonant frequencies and got lucky I grinned. You could say his ego was crystal clear to crack. The entire room groaned. 3 inmates developed spontaneous stress molting, 1 photosynthetic being actually wilted. And that, I continued cheerfully, brings us to our first lesson understanding human humor as a defense mechanism. You see, while most species evolved natural weapons, claws, plasma glands, psychic abilities, the ability to manipulate fundamental forces, humans developed something far more insidious. The ability to make everything into a joke. Silicon-based life form near the front vibrated nervously. But why? Well, I said, leaning forward conspiratorially, let me put it this way, what's the best way to deal with something scary? Shoot it with plasma, suggested a being that appeared to be made of living lightning. Phase shift into another dimension, offered a shadowy figure. Calculate its quantum probability function and collapse it into a favorable state, chittered a multi-limbed mathematician. No, and definitely no, though I'm keeping that last one in mind for my next performance review. I shook my head. The best way to deal with something scary is to make it less scary. And nothing makes something less scary than making it funny. But how does this help us in prison? Asked a gelatinous blob that reminded me suspiciously of Malblax. Let me demonstrate. I turned to the silicon-based life form. What's the worst thing that could happen to you in here? Being shattered, they answered immediately. Okay, so let's make it funny. What do you call a silicon-based life form that's really bad at jokes? They stared at me blankly. Silicon Valley. The silence was deafening. Then, slowly, the silicon being started vibrating in what I recognized as their version of laughter. I don't get it, said the living lightning bolt. It's a reference to an old Earth location known for technological innovation, I explained. But that's not important. What's important is that our silicon friend here is no longer thinking about being shattered. They're trying to figure out why that terrible joke is supposedly funny. Understanding began to dawn on various alien faces and non-faces. You see, I continued, humor isn't just about making people laugh. It's about changing perspective. When you can laugh at something, you take away its power to frighten you. And in a place like this, I gestured around at the prison, that's more valuable than any weapon. Is that why no one messes with you anymore? Asked the shadowy figure. Because you've made everything into a joke. Partially, I admitted. But it's also because no one knows quite what to make of a species that can look at the infinite horrors of the universe and say, that's what she said. More confused looks. Don't worry about that one. Earth cultural reference. The point is, while everyone else is trying to prove how tough they are, humans have mastered the art of being unpredictable, and in a prison full of beings who can literally calculate probability functions. Being unpredictable is better than being tough. The rest of the orientation went surprisingly well. I taught them basic prison etiquette, yes. The food is supposed to be that color, no. That doesn't mean you should eat it, explained the unofficial hierarchy. Just because someone can bend reality doesn't mean they're in charge, they might just be really lost. And even gave them a crash course in human idioms. When I say break a leg, I'm not actually threatening you, unless you're made of legs, in which case maybe take a step back. By the end of the session, I had them all participating in a game I liked to call Make Your Worst Fear Funny. The living lightning bolt came up with a joke about short circuits that actually made the silicon being fall over laughing. The shadowy figure developed an entire routine about dimensional anxiety that had everyone questioning the nature of reality, but in a fun way. As they filed out, looking considerably more relaxed than when they'd arrived, the warden's geometric shapes appeared beside me. Fascinating, they hummed. Their stress levels have decreased by 47%, and their adaptation probability has increased by 63%. They just needed to learn that it's okay to laugh at the absurdity of their situation, I shrugged. Perhaps the warden mused, their shapes forming a thoughtful pattern. Or perhaps they needed to learn that the most dangerous being in the prison isn't the one with the most powerful weapons, but the one who can make those weapons seem ridiculous. I grinned. Was that a joke, warden? Certainly not, they replied, but their shapes arranged themselves into what I swore was a smile. Though I must admit, I'm beginning to understand the appeal. From that day on, my legend in the prison only grew. But it changed from being the terrifying human who could defeat anyone with a well-timed pun to something perhaps even more powerful, the one who could teach others to laugh at their fears. Don't get me wrong, I still maintain my reputation. The time a new inmate tried to establish dominance by starting a riot in the cafeteria, I shut it down with nothing but a series of increasingly terrible food puns. Why did the quantum physicist break up with the cafeteria lady? Because there was too much uncertainty in their relationship. The riot ended not because anyone was scared, but because they were too busy trying to explain to each other why that joke was supposedly funny. By the time they figured out it was a play on Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, they'd forgotten what they were rioting about in the first place. And maybe that's the real secret to surviving in a galactic prison, not by being the toughest, or the smartest, or even the funniest, but by being the one who can help others see the humor in their own situation. Because at the end of the day, we're all just a bunch of beings from across the universe, thrown together in a space-time box, trying to figure out why the human keeps making jokes about quantum entanglement being a perfect relationship. And somehow, that makes everything a little bit better. Even the food cubes. Though I still don't trust that color.of course, not everyone appreciated my unique approach to prison rehabilitation. Especially not Guard Commander Xthrix, a being composed entirely of what appeared to be angry static electricity and poor life choices. "You're undermining prison discipline," he crackled one day, cornering me after my latest orientation session. "These inmates are supposed to be intimidated, not entertained. Have you considered that maybe they can be both?" I suggested. "I mean, look at you, you're basically walking proof that negative and positive can coexist." His electrical field intensified. Was that a physics joke? More of an observation, really. Though I suppose you could say I find your current attitude rather shocking. The lights in the corridor flickered dangerously. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You treat everything like it's some kind of game." Not everything, I corrected. Just the things that take themselves too seriously. Like prison guards who think they're literal forces of nature. That might have been pushing it too far. Xthrix's form expanded, electrical arcs dancing across the walls. "Perhaps you need a reminder of where you are, human. This isn't your primitive Earth correctional facility. This is a maximum security galactic prison, housing the most dangerous criminals in 12 dimensions." I pretended to look around in surprise. Really? I thought this was a spa resort. Though that would explain why the massage service is so terrible, really shocking customer service, if you ask me.
"Enough," Xthrix roared, his form now filling the entire corridor. "You will spend the next week in solitary confinement."
I shrugged. "Okay, but you should know I've been working on my one-man show. It's called Stand-Up Philosophy, A Human's Guide to Cosmic Irony. I've got this great bit about Schrodinger's prison cell." The guard commander made a sound like a power station having an existential crisis and stormed off, leaving scorch marks on the walls. I spent that week in solitary, but it wasn't quite what Xthrix had hoped for. Turns out, the isolation cells in a galactic prison are equipped with quantum communication systems to prevent inmates from going insane. The system was designed to create simple puzzle simulations to keep prisoners' minds occupied. What no one had counted on was a human with too much time on their hands and a profound understanding of cosmic irony. By day 3, I had reprogrammed the quantum puzzles to tell jokes. Every time a guard checked the monitoring system, they were greeted with setups like "What did the quantum physicist say?" when he walked into a bar? Followed by "Don't worry, he was simultaneously inside and outside the bar." By day 5, the isolation cell had become the most popular spot in the prison. Guards would make excuses to pass by just to hear the latest quantum physics puns. Even the void walkers started hanging around, though they claimed they were just observing the decay of sanity in real time. When Xthrix finally came to release me, he found me teaching the quantum communication system how to deliver the perfect comedic pause. "This is not what solitary confinement is supposed to be like," he said, his electrical form dimming in defeat. "No," I agreed, "but it's what it needed to be. Did you know that humor actually increases problem-solving ability? The quantum communication system is 30% more efficient now that it understands timing." The system is not supposed to understand timing. It's supposed to prevent psychological deterioration. And what better way to prevent psychological deterioration than through laughter? I stood up, brushing off my prison jumpsuit. You know what your problem is, Commander? You see prison as a punishment. I see it as an opportunity for growth, even if that growth comes in the form of terrible puns. He crackled thoughtfully. The warden says your methods have reduced violent incidents by 62%. That's because it's hard to maintain a proper threatening atmosphere when someone keeps making jokes about quantum superposition. Did you hear about the quantum physicist who got pulled over? He complained that the officer changed his momentum by measuring his speed. I don't understand that reference, Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. But that's not important. What's important is that, while you're trying to figure out why that's supposed to be funny, you're not thinking about how to make my life miserable. X-Thrix's electrical field fluctuated in what might have been reluctant amusement. You are either the most brilliant or the most insane inmate I've ever encountered. Why not both? Quantum superposition, remember. From that day on, X-Thrix stopped trying to maintain strict discipline and started attending my orientation sessions. He even contributed his own joke once, something about resistance being futile, because he was a superconductor. It wasn't great, but the fact that he tried meant more than any successful punchline could have. The real breakthrough came during what became known as the Great Cafeteria Quantum Collapse of 2184. A group of new inmates, still trying to prove themselves, decided to start a food fight. Unfortunately, one of them was a quantum probability manipulator who accidentally turned all the food cubes into Schrödinger's lunch simultaneously edible and inedible until observed. The situation was rapidly deteriorating into chaos. Half the inmates were stuck in quantum uncertainty, neither hungry nor full. The other half were trying to calculate the wave functions of their meals. 3 different reality warpers were attempting to stabilize the probability field, but they only managed to make things worse by creating a temporal loop where Tuesday's lunch kept repeating. That's when I stood up on a table and shouted, "Hey, what did the quantum physicist say to the cafeteria worker?" The chaos paused. Even the quantum uncertain inmates flickered with interest. "I'd like my sandwich with quantum ham, but don't observe it too closely, it might collapse into lunch meat." The groan that followed was so powerful it actually stabilized the quantum field. The food returned to its normal, questionably edible state. The temporal loop collapsed. And in that moment, as aliens from across the galaxy united in collective disappointment at a terrible physics pun, I realized something profound. Humor wasn't just a defense mechanism or a way to cope with prison life. It was a fundamental force of the universe, as powerful as gravity or electromagnetism. It could collapse quantum states, break temporal loops, and most importantly, bring together beings who had nothing in common except their shared experience of existence. After all, what is humor if not the ultimate observer effect? By looking at the absurdity of our situation and laughing at it, we collapse all possible outcomes into the one we can live with. And maybe that's the real reason humans developed humor. Not because we're clever or brave or uniquely suited to handle cosmic horror, but because somewhere along the line, we realize that the universe is basically one big cosmic joke and the only sane response is to laugh at it. Even if that laugh happens to come from inside a galactic prison cell. At least the food's funny looking on purpose now. I made sure of that.